Hello everyone, and welcome to our session today on Pick the Wrong Cloud, What Now? Joining us today is Jeff Pergolski from Innovia Consulting. And before I pass it over to Jeff, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library later this week for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box and we will get them answered at the end of the session. And so now I will pass it on to Jeff to kick off our presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie, and thanks everyone for attending. So today's topic is picked the wrong cloud. And we have run into this issue, I guess, as cloud computing has become more popular. We've had people who have made the move to the cloud, and maybe it's been less than ideal for them. So we thought this would be a valid topic as we see people starting to migrate not just to the cloud, but from one cloud to another. So let me get the slideshow kicked off here. That's me, and that is my contact information, and I am happy to have you reach out to me as Angie sends follow-up for the webinar for the attendees or for people who are watching this after to try to answer any questions you have. This cloud conversation can be sort of complicated. So in terms of the layout today, I've got a relatively thick slide deck. So we're gonna try to get through it in enough time that we don't go over. But in terms of the overall presentation, we're going to just kind of rewind the tape a little bit to go back to some basic cloud definitions, just so everyone understands some of the techno babble that I will spit out during this, different cloud delivery models, etc. And then we're going to talk about sort of what makes a good cloud, bad cloud, and what's involved in migrating from one cloud to another. So start with just defining the cloud. Again, this may be pretty basic, but it's a collection of integrated and networked hardware, software, and internet infrastructure. In this case, called a platform. Doesn't always have to be that way, but another definition: using the internet for communication and transport, providing this hardware, software, and networking services to clients. And an important part of that is that the cloud really should sort of hide the complexity and the details of the underlying infrastructure. So it's not, you're not getting in the guts of what is supporting this. You are just looking for a solution, a platform to host your application on. So in terms of what does that mean? I think actually a really simplified definition of the cloud is just using someone else's computer. And so in terms of options, there's on-demand services. The important parts and characteristics of cloud delivery models are that they are in general a pay for as you use and as needed, meaning that they're elastic. So let's say you've got seasonal help and you have 50 people that double your workforce during your busy season and then go away in your slow season. In the old days, if you were connecting to resources on premise, you would have to make sure that you designed your infrastructure to handle your most demanding scenario. So you'd have to over-design for half the year and then let those IT resources idle in your off season. With cloud, you can provision just what you need just when you want it. At least that's the way you're supposed to be able to do it, and have and only be paying for the amount of resources necessary for exactly what your business needs to run on. So you have an extra 50 users, you spin those users up and use them for a month, for 6 months, and then turn those off and stop paying for them the day they stop working for you. So again, these solutions are available to the general public, to big businesses, corporations, as well as small businesses now. And so I think the most important things to remember about cloud is that they're remotely hosted, they're ubiquitous. So this the service is available anywhere. That is anywhere that you have an internet connection, and then it's commodified. So it's more like your utility bill than it is. In terms of just maybe looking at, I'm in Wisconsin, we're at, again, we're having a really cold snap and it's below zero. Thinking about from your home heatings, the cloud is more like your utility company that's providing you the gas and electricity to run your heating system, not your HVAC contractor that comes into your home to maintain your equipment. That's a different service delivery model. The cloud is just a commodity in this case. Visually, what does the cloud look like? There's a couple different versions. The service value nets or software as a service, where you're just delivering an IT service like email. So Office 365 for email, a hosted Exchange server online. You don't, there is a server that exists, but you don't care about that. All you care about is that your users have a connection to their email. And so that would be a software as a service. The middle cloud here, platform as a service, is when you are delivering something like SQL Server, but you're delivering this in a platform so that it is bundled with all the underlying infrastructure required to run that. Without getting too technical, SQL Server runs on a Windows Server environment, which means it needs a Windows Server CAL to connect. It also needs probably a SQL Server CAL, depending on how it's licensed. All that stuff in a SQL service instance would just be delivered as a platform. And then the last cloud on the bottom there, infrastructure as a service, is where you're just migrating the same servers that exist in your data center right now. You're just going to put them somewhere else. Maybe the reason is because the hardware that is running in your data center is getting old, and you've decided you don't want to invest in rebuying all that infrastructure, so you're just going to migrate it to a cloud provider. And you're not going to change anything about it other than you're going to change the clients and how they access this. You're going to point them to the new address, but you're just taking all the stuff that's in your server room and putting it in the cloud without any other changes. And that's referred to as infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. So that's sort of the end of our little cloud scenario. I had to go back about 8 years to a presentation that when I was presenting on this topic with my coworker Freya, and we would present on this, and I just looked at all the concerns we had about security and a lot of that stuff, that it's just, we have changed tremendously in the cloud adoption and our attitude towards the cloud, as it's become pretty much the thing that everyone is going to now. So getting on to the specific topic of this webinar, what makes a cloud bad? Here's a unhappy cloud here. I think actually there's a few things that make a cloud bad in the case of our customers who have looked to move from their existing platform onto something better. Number one, it's expensive. So either there are a lot of ways that a cloud solution is delivered, and thus there's a lot of ways that it is bought and sold, but understanding all of the expenses that accompany your cloud is very important. So does your cloud include licensing? If you are getting back to SQL, which is a terribly important application in the business world. If you're hosting a SQL server, you're having someone host a SQL server for you. Do they provide that licensing? Do you need to provide that licensing? Are there licensing scenarios that you are prevented from using because of your cloud provider? Are you being charged for storage? Are you being charged for backing up these servers? You can, there's a lot of options, and we're going to get to that near the end of the presentation, but it's important to have a good handle. So if you're on a cloud right now that you feel is really expensive, it might be time to look around for something better. The other thing is that cloud contracts, sort of like cell phones, and you notice the price of an all-you-can-eat cell phone contract with unlimited data. A couple years ago, that was so expensive that you couldn't even buy it because providers really weren't, unless you had a really, really old contract, you couldn't even buy it. And then it started to, be offered around $100 a user per line. It's now down to like $40 per user per line. So cloud is a lot. Is very much similar to that scenario, in that as the adoption rates increase dramatically, the prices come down. So maybe it's not even that that your cloud provider is charging incorrectly. Maybe it's just that you're on a 3-year-old contract that you need to have a discussion with them about getting on something that's a little a contract anyway, that's more reflective of what the marketplace is right now. Another reason that that makes a cloud bad is that you've got poor service and support. There are a couple different performance relevant performance metrics that that you want to be measured. In this case, the poor service and support has just from the provider. So if you need to add a user, is that something that that your provider lets you do yourself? You can self-provision. Do you need to send something to them, and does it take them, a week to get back to you on your request? Do they constantly monitor the performance of their environment? So I'm not talking about now here your connection to the internet, which they don't have any control of, but I'm talking about like their servers and their infrastructure and their backplane switches, etc. Are they monitoring all of that for you and then delivering support and being proactive on that? We have run into some of the smaller providers where they've spun up their own data center and they just don't have the money, expertise, and or manpower to keep the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, performing at where it needs to. So poor service and support can make a bad cloud. Is it inflexible? So in terms of what the, is it really easy to make changes? Can you move it up? Can you move it down? Can you connect from everywhere? Those are the flexible things that we talk about. And then from a performance standpoint, again, here I'm like, we're not talking about customer support performance. We're talking about the actual hardware. Are you running on the latest and greatest? Are you taking advantage of load distribution? Are there things in place that make sure at certain benchmarks in performance, like let's say you go from 20 users to 25 users, maybe that is going to tax the server too much, and is there an automated provisioning of resources, so as soon as virtual memory reaches a certain benchmark, like we're going to start to run into problems, so we're going to spin up a new server and we're going to load balance this. These are things that high-end cloud providers give you that if you don't have that sort, you would be running into performance issues, and that would make it a bad cloud. And last but not least, reliability. So does the cloud provider have a financially backed service level agreement or SLA that guarantees that you will always have access. It's a scary thing when you move your business software to a cloud provider and they don't, and it's a solution that isn't reliable, and once or twice a week the system goes down for a half hour. If it's your business software, your entire organization is, you've stopped sending invoices, collecting money, possibly producing product. So it's important to understand the reliability of your provider, and in a best case scenario, you've got something in a service level agreement that is backed with backed financially, so that okay, if we go down this often, this is how much it costs us. So are we going to be compensated for our time? So reliability is the last thing, I guess, that could make a cloud bad. And just kind of circling back to concerns about the cloud, and again, some of these are a little bit older, but we always have, you're nervous when you're depending on others. So cloud computing means that you are depending on others. You're moving the infrastructure, the data, the applications outside your four walls. So now, in the old days, when everything was in your building, in your data center, you could go to your IT manager and say, hey, this server is running really slow. What's going on? Everyone's complaining, and you could have answers. That wasn't a perfect scenario either, because he didn't. I'm guessing that your IT manager didn't have a second server all spun up and ready to as a hot site swap to if there was a problem with the existing server. But at least you knew who you were dealing with, and you had ultimately a more of a feeling of control. If you're hosting with Google, Amazon, Microsoft, you've got you are at you're at their mercy in terms of performance and what they determine is important from a performance standpoint. So relying on a partner for such an important thing is certainly a concern. Security, that's also been a question. I always argue with people who are anti-cloud that you can't provide the small to medium-sized business just lacks the IT expertise and resources to lock down your environment as tightly as the primary providers like Amazon and Rackspace and Microsoft. But that being said, there's also certainly a lot bigger target placed on the major cloud providers, so that you're not going to have thousands and thousands of hackers trying to get into virtual machines hosted on Azure. Or you are going to have thousands and thousands of hackers. You're not going to have thousands and thousands of hackers that are trying to get into your machine on your network from your public IP address. So security is always a concern, and in most cases, is always addressed by the providers. But then also there's the question of policy and data storage. I know a lot of times when we're doing cloud assessments, people want to know where their data is going to be stored, as some providers can't give you that information because they don't specify it. It goes up into their cloud, and there's all these parameters they use to decide where your data goes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same geographical area that you are. In most cases it would be, but it's important. Sometimes you have company policy that says this data has to be within the United States, within so many 100 miles of our location. And then the sort of also related to that policy, but what sort of policies do they have for failover? How can you access files? And if you lose access to them, will they help you regain access, or do they say that was user error? And so there's a lot of questions. And another big question is, how do you get off of your cloud? Like, what is your exit strategy? If you're dealing with virtual machines, do they have tools embedded in their cloud platform that help you get your data and your virtual machines off of their cloud? Or what is the exit strategy? So that's another thing to consider, as well as you do require a constant internet connection. Some of our customers are in areas that prevent them from having this. So cloud computing is impossible if you can't connect to the internet. And it also, if you are using it for a complete infrastructure solution, and you're saving all of your documents and files in the cloud, that's great because they can be accessed anywhere. But if you lose internet, you can't do anything. It might be like in the case of having only your email hosted in the cloud. If you lose your internet connection, okay, we're not going to get email for a while, but I can still print invoices. I can still do significant parts of my job. If your ERP application is hosted in the cloud and you lose internet, you're not going to be doing anything. So so that's important. And then it's also important that that you understand that a lot of cloud solutions don't work well with low speed connections. And so depending on what your bandwidth, both and with cloud, it's important to understand not just your download speed from the internet, which most ISPs advertise. It's also important to understand what your upload speed is. So if you are constantly syncing data, if you're running an application that is pulling from a SQL server that's in the cloud onto local hardware on your network within your building, you're going to want to make sure that that you've got a robust upload speed as well as download. And depending on where you're located and who you are, who your provider is, you may not have the opportunity to get as much download and upload speed as you like. Also, in some cases, this parameter seems to be turning upside down over the last year or two, at least in the Microsoft Dynamics world. But at one point, some of the cloud features in terms of applications, the cloud versions weren't as robust. If you look at Microsoft Word, there is a Microsoft Word web app from Microsoft that doesn't have nearly the same tool set as the Microsoft Word desktop app. So so you have to consider that when analyzing applications, that is the cloud version just as powerful as the full-featured on-premises version. And in a lot of cases, maybe that doesn't even matter to you, but it is important to understand. For Word, I know that most people who use Microsoft Word use about 20% of everything that's in there. So in most cases, I would say like 90+%, most people would be just fine doing what they need to do in Word using the web app and its limited functionality, but that is a case-by-case basis, and that's important to be analyzed. So a happy cloud. What makes a happy cloud? That is the wrong kind of happy cloud. Let's go with something a little more innocent like this. So what makes a happy cloud? Basically, everything that is everything that I just showed you, do the opposite of that. Make it inexpensive, make it reliable, provide great customer service, make it flexible and easy to manage. So we are going to talk about a specific cloud, and that is Microsoft's Azure, and because it is our most popular cloud solution. We have used one in the past several years ago, and now we are deploying strictly on Azure. and there's a reason for that. So an Azure cloud migration, we're talking about sort of what prompts people to look at Azure, and what prompts them to what concerns them rather about moving to the cloud, and how does that the people that they have, their IT expertise. This is a big change for an organization, so what's involved. And so we get to what we'll refer to as migration triggers. What are the specific events that would make you think about moving to the cloud or switching cloud providers? Maybe you've got a data center contract that's expiring. Maybe you're adding business. You're acquiring businesses, and you're going to need extra capacity that either you don't have capacity for on-premise, or you are or your cloud provider is going to start to become too expensive. You've got urgent capacity needs, so being able to purchase another server, build the operating system, join it to your domain, all those things start to become time consuming. And when you look at how easy it is to spin up a server, like a virtual server on Azure, it starts to make you think. But maybe you're just doing a software and hardware refresh, and so you're going to need to, you don't want to purchase, you don't want to spend the money for licensing and on-premise hardware. Maybe you've had security threats in your own environment, and you realize that you lack the expertise. Maybe it's a compliance issue, like GDPR was last year, where you just don't have the ability to provide all the compliance necessary, all the reporting tools required for access of data and audit purposes. And so putting it in the cloud on Azure would give you all of that. And then there's also things like software end of support, or delivering applications faster. You want your IT staff to be able to focus on more strategic things than just supporting the servers that are in your environment. So the migration is actually sort of what is really the bread and butter of what we're talking about today. What kind of tool sets do you have? What sort of options are there? And with Microsoft Azure, there's all kinds of stuff. So there's flexibility, and important to note is hybrid support. So since Server 2012, Microsoft has been baking in the code of the server operating system things that make it easy to synchronize with servers elsewhere, and specifically with their Azure cloud platform. So you get the ability to do a hybrid infrastructure where maybe there's some servers that remain in your data center, and then some servers that are located online. You can have applications that operate in that same way, and we'll touch on that at the very end, but applications that use infrastructure in both the cloud and on-premise. So you've got that flexibility. You've also got a cost-effective way to move that. So you've got Azure hybrid benefits in a lot of cases, meaning you already own Microsoft licensing, and that gives you the ability to consume Azure services at a discount, and in a hybrid way. You get free security updates for end of support servers, and you get tools to get started yourself. So that is that's very important. You don't have to rely on a partner to do it if you've got IT staff with expertise, or with a thirst for knowledge, and if they're not comfortable with Azure migrations, it's become such a monster, it's so popular that Microsoft has all of these resources that they've developed and give to you for free that allow you to migrate. And then just the fact that it's low risk and high confidence migration because you've got a rich partner ecosystem. I guess something that I did want to call out specifically on this slide is the free security updates for end of support servers and sort of the extension there. This has been something that Microsoft announced in I think at the Worldwide Partner Conference at Inspire last July. The inclusion of, or rather the extension of support for products that are end of support. So specifically, Windows Server 2008 and SQL Server 2008. Those are end of support. So if those are running in your data center right now, they're not currently supported by Microsoft, which is a pretty big risk. If you move those servers to Azure, do nothing different, just migrate them using the Azure migration tools. Microsoft will extend they'll offer extended support for those products. I think the Windows Server is extended until January 14th, 2020, and SQL Server to July 9th of 2019. So if you're looking to, because you've sort of dragged your feet in terms of migrating those applications, now you've got if you can move them to Azure, you've bought yourself a little time, and Microsoft is certainly doing that to sort of increase the competition to get more people to move away from their biggest competitor, which is probably Amazon Web Services. But you know that does work out well for you if you're one of those organizations that still has some old 2008 server and SQL technology in your data center. So the Azure cloud migration, a couple benefits of that. The fact that it's the only consistent hybrid cloud I mentioned earlier. You've got common identity, so Azure Active Directory synchronizes with your on-premise Active Directory, and as well as the unified cloud platform, the data platform, and security and management. So these are all things that your IT staff should be used to working with in the Windows Server world, and now they've been slightly tweaked to move them to Azure. So that's important. And the migration tools, the zero application data loss during migration, the near zero application downtime. Microsoft has really, over the last 2 years especially, developed a lot of powerful resources, as well as hiring resources that are there to assist customers. And in most scenarios, being able to help customers move to Azure for free, having enterprise class support during the entire process. So that's huge. And then the fact that it's really the most cost-effective cloud solution for Windows Server. There are scenarios. I mean, Windows Server isn't everything. There's Linux. There's all kinds of other potential server OSs, but in the Windows Server world, Azure is the cheapest. And the fact that you have tools available to you at each stage to do it yourself can be another huge savings, because these cloud migrations, whether you're moving from on-prem to the cloud or moving from one cloud to another, they can be complicated and thus expensive. So again, a global, highly available hosted service with immediate access to upgrades every 3 weeks in terms of the platform itself. It's scalable, so for teams from tens to thousands, and then it's compliant and secured by design. So where does that move, the migration journey. There is, this is 4 different migration scenarios. There is a rehost, which is a lift and shift. That's just moving everything in your data center to Azure and shifting the connections and where they're pointed so that they reach the cloud. There's refactor, re-architect, and rebuild, and some of that has to do with the applications, more application focused, but we'll dive into that just a little bit more here. So you've got tools, as we mentioned, and that's sort of the big differentiator here between Azure and other cloud platforms. They just, you've got these Azure Migrate, the Data Migration Assistant, and SQL Server Migration Assistant. So that's in the assessment phase of the migration. Then the actual migration, you've got Azure Site Recovery, the Azure Database Migration Service, and the sort of using the Azure Site Recovery, creating a VPN that points to your new Azure and having deploying an Azure management server on premise that starts to collect everything and starts to push it to the cloud. I mean, it really is pretty amazing. It is like having a robot in your IT on your IT team that just starts to once you define the parameters of what is being moved, you install this migration server. Usually, in the case of most of our customers, it's a virtual machine that gets deployed in your virtualized environment. It starts to gather everything it needs. It starts to build images of the machines that are going to be migrated, and it sends it up to Azure, and it's done automatically. It gives you a constant monitoring of the process and then lets you know when it's done, and then it keeps it synchronized until you finally flip the switch over. So that does allow you to take incremental steps in testing, to move certain users to use the new Azure environment and test to see that the applications perform as well, if not better, as they did in your on-premise environment or your old cloud environment. And then ultimately it allows you to optimize the security and management and maybe add some stuff that you didn't have before after the migration, because the tool sets that exist in Azure are really robust. And the other thing that's important is that you're supported, there's this huge partner ecosystem of people that can help with that. Here we've got a bunch listed that are global partners that can help you everywhere. There's probably, oh, look at that. There's also partners like Innovia that we've got our own team of technology consultants that have done a lot of data migration and are comfortable working in Azure. We are certified in Azure. We're a tier 1 cloud solution provider, so we have been working on this in this world for a long time, and so we can help you as well. And then just a summary of those cloud migration strategies: the lift and shift, the refactor, re-architect or rebuild, and sort of the different drivers there that maybe would push you more towards one of these solutions than another. This is important. And then where does the benefits of Fasttrack, which is the ability, sort of what I was speaking to just a minute ago, where you get direct assistance from Microsoft Azure engineers that are working with partners and delivering a best practice for the for you on your working on your server in your environment. Giving the Azure engineers this is the type of firewall we have. This is the model number. What configs do I need to point this to my new Azure instance? And they're able to help down to that level of detail, which is which really makes it quite easy to do. And then again, any of the even in Fasttrack, there's the plan, test, and use. That's an important scenario, I think, regardless of what you're doing in IT. And Azure supports all of those. And then equally as important, Microsoft provides the training for for your people, for your IAT staff to so that they can start to pick up on the Azure essential skills. They can define their own learning paths, get to advanced skills, and then ultimately be certified. Because Microsoft has the resources to do that, they haven't ignored this. So being able to train your people on this solution without having to invest a lot of money is also a huge benefit to your organization. And ultimately, what that leaves you with is the ability then to optimize and stay secure and well managed and cost efficient after the move. So combining, a smart strategy at the beginning, a well-defined scope of the project, enterprise class support from Microsoft Azure engineers, and then training your staff on the new reality of a Microsoft hosted Azure solution gives you peace of mind and an optimized solution going forward. Moving data to Azure, on-premise to Azure, there are different approaches, moving workloads or just, moving data ongoing. The orchestration piece, so how do you differentiate between active data and static data, and the tools that you have to do that. There are several options in each of these. And then the data transport route, how are you going to move this? Is it just, are you creating something like a data box edge? Are you taking this offline? But I guess the point is that regardless of your data migration requirements, there's always a path to get you to Azure, and we haven't found one yet that we haven't been able to move there. And so then the ways that you can get there. A cloud consult with Microsoft is something that is available to you. If you're interested in that, reach out to your CSP. If you don't have a CSP, reach out please to us here at Innovia, and we will get you put in touch with the right resources at Microsoft that work with us to help gather the appropriate information for you to decide if moving to the cloud is right for you. So we've got a cloud consult with Microsoft, and we've also, as I mentioned, Azure is also a do-it-yourself cloud. So the 5-minute quick starts, the step-by-step tutorials. I just did a screen capture here of some of the resources on the Azure site. These are all really helpful little tidbits to give you an idea of what's involved, and having your IT team look at this and get a feel for what the project would look like will give you a comfort level that either we're okay doing this on our own, or we definitely need a partner, or hey, let's try moving one of our servers and see how it goes ourselves, and then decide what we want to do. The other thing to consider is, which I mentioned early on, is determining the expense. And Microsoft has an Azure Calculator that allows you, you can replicate your virtual machines, SQL databases. If you're going to use things like artificial intelligence, if you've got an IoT, an Internet of Things solution, as you can see, there's a lot of, this is just the first screen for you to start calculating what your Azure consumption would be. And figuring that out, it can be tricky. There are a lot of variables in the case of of virtual machines, for instance, which is only one part of this, although probably the most important part. You've got the size of the machine. So when I say size, that means the amount of RAM, the number of cores for a processor, the amount of data storage that you need. So you want a machine that is robust and is going to perform at a high level so that your staff that is relying on this server is efficient. Then you're also so then you start to be charged by processor, how much processor use you have, besides just how many gigabytes of data are on the server. You start to get charged for bandwidth. If you're running an application that pushes data back and forth quite a bit, it's important to understand that. So there's a number of ways to that you get charged for Azure, and any cloud for that matter. So it's very important that you have a good feel for what that's going to cost. And Microsoft does provide a really helpful tool in the Azure Calculator, but oftentimes I'd recommend having someone else check your work if you're looking at an Azure Calculator, so that you understand exactly, so that you don't go in thinking that you're going to have a $500 a month Azure bill and it ends up being $2,000 a month because you misjudged one of the metrics that's on there. So that's important to understand. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, specifically related to Dynamics NAV and Business Central, is that Microsoft, in the same way that they baked into the code of the server operating systems dating back to Server 2012, the ability to connect with cloud resources. Microsoft, as of the October 2018 release, is bringing this sort of intelligent edge hybrid scenario to our ERP applications. So they continue to invest heavily in what they refer to as the intelligent cloud, which brings business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of these cloud productivity and analytics tools to your data. So even though you're using on-premise solutions, you have an on-premise nav server, for instance, if you can get that to a level that will connect to the intelligent cloud through Dynamics 365 Business Central, you then start to give yourself access to applications like Power BI and Microsoft Flow and Power Apps, machine learning, etc., like all that cool new stuff. And you know, that is I mean, that's a really powerful set of tools that you can turn on if you are running in a hybrid environment. So the way it works is that the application starts to push push your data into a if you see that atom-looking thing in the middle of the circle on the right, the CDS, the Common Data Service. It puts your data from your Dynamics ERP application into a database in the cloud, keeps it synced up with your on-premise data, and then allows you to interact with that data through all these different, you know, Power Apps, Power BI, machine learning, and apply all of that sort of cool analytical reporting tools on that data without having to you know, constantly reach into your on-premise data and open up ports on your firewall, etc. So it's a hybrid solution of cloud that doesn't involve anything more than a subscription and getting your on-premise version of the application up to the current level so that it can connect through the intelligent edge and intelligent cloud to the common data service. So that is, I think, the last slide that I have. Let me double check. Yes, so now we are at any questions, and I have been I've been talking the whole time. And Angie hasn't interrupted me, so I'm going to assume that means no questions. Do you want to confirm that for me, Angie?
That is correct, Jeff. Appears that there are no questions, but if you do have any, please feel free to contact us, and we will be happy to discuss those questions with you.
Awesome. So let me just get back here. So, okay. Upcoming events. As always, you can go to innovia.com/events. And but I know, Angie, you always have them on the tip of your tongue. Are there any events that you want to shout out on this webinar?
Yes, I do, Jeff. First of all, thank you for presenting today, and to everyone on today's call, or if you're watching on demand, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We do have a few more webinars coming soon. Next week on March 13th, we have Chad Williams from Innovia Consulting, and he will be presenting on Custom Business Central reporting. And then Jeff is back with us again next week, next Thursday, the 14th, and he is going to be presenting on Microsoft Power BI. So if you're interested in any of those webinars or future webinars, don't hesitate to register. And Focus is
Awesome.
coming up next week. In Houston, Texas. Focus is a 2-day deep dive training event to help you get a deeper understanding of your Microsoft Dynamics Nav, Power BI, and Business Central systems. So if you want to learn more about Focus and to get all the details for this conference, you can visit our conference page on our website, and that's innovia.com/conferences. So if you're interested, please register. And then Innovia is doing our annual customer conference. So that will be held in Wisconsin Dells at the Chula Vista Resort and Conference Center, and that will be on April 24th and 25th this year. We would love to have you. Please contact your rep, or you can visit our conference page where it will have all the details of our conference. This is a free event for you to attend, and like I said, we would love to have you, so register now. Hotel rooms are going fast. We hope to see you there. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, you.
Thanks, Jeff.